Welcome to the next episode of the Cannabis Review. I'm delighted to be joined in this episode by Gary Allen, who's the CEO of New Frontier Data based in America. How are you keeping, Gary?
Doing well, thank you. It's a beautiful Friday afternoon, so I'm really excited about doing this with you.
Thank you very much. It's the tale of two weathers. I'm in Ireland and it's dark and it's cold and it's rainy. So luckily we get to converse over chats now today. I'm delighted to have you on. You guys are one of the most preeminent companies in the terms of data gathering in the cannabis industry. Do you maybe want to give everybody a quick little overview of your history in business and how you ended up at New Frontier Data and how long you've been there?
Sure. So my career has been started in the middle '90s in data and technology with the beginning of the internet, in digital marketing, bid management for search. A couple of the companies that I was part of, I was a chief technology officer at Performix, which became DoubleClick, which became Google in the mid 2000s. And throughout my career, I've been really focused on, solving issues with consumer data and with enhancing behaviors through the applications, and how to organize data in such a way that mass marketers, enterprises can use it and make relevant decisions. I've been with New Frontier Data. That's the second part of the question. I've been with New Frontier Data since 2016, November of 2016. New Frontier Data was started by Giada Bardakarser in 2014. And really the idea behind it was, there was an emerging market, cannabis, and there weren't any real data collection, market research, or market, reporting, as you see in some of the much more mature markets. And so Giada started the company to collect data, vet it, make it professional, make it usable, and then, disseminate that data to investors, operators, researchers, policymakers. And we have been, over the last 10 years, almost 10 years now, we've operated in as many as 64 countries at once. We've collected data from over 100 countries worldwide. We really focused this last few years on the American market, right? The American market is very large and very diverse because there are 30 plus individual markets and ecosystems that have had to be created. And so those supply chains, those consumers, those retail operators needed a lot of focus and understanding of the data that they are generating, collecting, and what to do with it.
Yes, very good. It seems to me like the most important decisions that any good executive team at any company could be using is to implement strategies to gather data and how to use computer science to maybe execute on that data. When it comes to the data gathering in cannabis, what do you see are the best sources? Is it point of sale systems, or is there a multitude of tools that you would use to gather data across a multitude of industries?
So the question of what is the best source of data for any particular industry is really focused, is really determined by the use case of that data. So, for example, for dispensaries, obviously their point of sale data is the foundation of all of their data collection. The interesting thing about the cannabis industry is that, again, as I said earlier, because every single supply chain has to be created in a bubble for every single state, there is no shortage of data in this industry. We have tons of data, from grow data, right? From distribution, from manufacturing, from testing, medical, both patients as well as the administration of that, the administering of medical registrations, and the doctors that are operating in the medical market. And then, of course, with the dispensaries, all of the retail data, there is a plethora of data. The ideal answer to your question is, depending on the use case and your vertical that you're in within the industry, really will depend on the source of the data that you need.
When it comes to some of the devices from vapes and medical inhaling devices, do you see that as going to be a huge future source of data? I'm sure the ability to consume the patient's number of puffs a day and how much they're consuming on a weekly basis is going to be almost like these Oura rings, where you can basically get access to this information that doesn't currently exist at the moment.
Sure, and there actually are a bunch of data sources in and around that. There are a bunch of apparatus data collection that is happening with vape right now. One of the challenges in collecting data, in that manner, is that we don't understand yet the prescription. Right. So we don't really understand yet that you can prescribe other medications, by a specific milligram, by a specific dosage, by a specific, number of times a day that the doctor controls. So almost all of that data collection now is user controlled, right? It's the consumer, the patient that is giving you that data, and each patient will use it differently. In order for that data to be really useful at an enterprise level, we will have to have a far wider standardization of understanding what the prescriptive use of medical marijuana is for the specific ailment or malady that they're trying to cure, or they're trying to treat.
Very interesting. When it comes to the use of analytics and technology to implement the strategies in cannabis, how important is this for a company, in your opinion?
Well, in this day and age, data is, data. Everybody says data is more valuable than oil, and it is. And as I said earlier, there is no shortage of data in cannabis. When we first got into the industry, when the industry first started, there was a big worry that people didn't really understand how to collect data or how much data would actually be created. However, that's not our worry anymore, right? Your question of, is it important for people to use data, right, for their strategies? Of course it is. And again, it's user determined. Sorry, my dog is in the background.
You're okay, don't you worry.
So for example, a grower, right, LED lights and nutrient delivery and water delivery is all administered now by AI and machine learning, and there's a lot of data that is collected, and what is the THC production under certain conditions. In manufacturing, the same, right? There's a lot of challenges in the extraction and manufacturing that data will, in understanding what's happened before and being able to predict what will happen during the next growth cycle and then during the manufacturing process is really important. And that filters I'm not going to go through all 70 some odd verticals, but that filters all the way through to the dispensary, right? Really understanding not only what products are being sold and your profit margin and your operations and your efficiency, but also what products should you be selling, right, to consumers based on the consumers that live around you. And so data really is is really prevalent through every decision that we make, and an understanding, what decision you're trying to make and understanding what question you're trying to answer is really important. And then the data is available.
What determines something to become an emerging trend that would make you guys start to keep your eye on it and start covering the data on it?
Well, that's a great question. For us, it's one of the ones this year, the last year and a half. Obviously, the psychedelic market is an emerging trend, right? Psilocybin is more understood than even THC to the pharmaceutical companies, even to the federal government and to the FDA. And so there was a new wave of investment and of interest in that part of the market. And so we will go and collect data wherever the market kind of tells us to go, based on the activity within the market. So it's not an exact science. It's a understanding that we're only as good as the data that our customers need. So we will go and we will find whatever data it is that they ask for.
when it comes to the emerging European market that looks like it should be in the next however many years is going to kick off, again, what are the metrics that would determine for it to pique your interest? Obviously, see with Germany, it's stop, start, stop, start. A lot of the countries might have had a medical program, but it's very limited, like with Ireland, whereas there's a handful of people on it. What are your short-term expectations for Europe in terms of the ability to be able to gather good country-by-country data? Because I'm sure that data will initially be valuable for North American companies who want to penetrate into these markets, and whether they're an edibles company who wants to manufacture or sell here, or a company who wants to get into retail.
So I think that question is kind of twofold. First and foremost, 5 years ago, we were in almost all of those countries and or collecting data from almost all of those countries. Europe looked to be lighting up, right? And with Germany, France, we were in Romania, we were actually in the Middle East as well, and obviously England and Great Britain's medical programs, which all started to surge, and then they've all constricted, right? And the pandemic, I believe, is probably one of the biggest reasons for that, and not in the sense of only in the sense of that there were so many other things to worry about. Lawmakers in those countries were not worried about cannabis. We have good partnerships in Great Britain as well as Europe. And we have, data, there are partners over there, like prohibition partners that we work with that, as they grow and as they tell us to pay more attention to it, we will. We continue every year, though, to refresh all of our data from a country level. And so, in the first quarter of every year, we spend a lot of time and money going out to, we survey about 170 countries. We will end up collecting data from about 120 of them, and we'll do the same this year. And then once we look at that data, we'll look at it every year. For now, the second part of your question about American companies that are wanting to expand, the American market is in such a place right now that people are really driving to profitability, and they're driving to efficiency. They're not driving to market expansion like we saw 5 years ago, right? It's not a land grab, because the investments in the U.S. have primarily dried up over the last 2.5 years. They don't have a lot of, R&D money to go out and look at a new country and try to predict. Lastly, what I'll say is, as you pointed out, the biggest economy that looked like they were going to actually move forward was Germany. And, it's a start and stop and start and stop. And we're at a point now with Germany that almost every word becomes a news cycle. And so incrementally, they're not making enough movement forward for any one of the data companies to kind of launch in there and, kind of put boots on the ground and really start to try to understand that market.
Yeah, it's been very interesting talking to you. Before I let you go, are you hoping for something in the next 12 months to happen in terms of federal legalization in America, or is this another one? How long is a piece of string?
Everybody, that's one of the big, I'm surprised it took so long to ask that question, to be honest with you. The part of my answer is New Frontier Data's answer, and part of my answer is Gary Allen's answer. All right. From New Frontier Data's point of view, we're here to support the federal government in any way possible. And helping them as we have with data and with real, vetted research and understanding the industry. Gary Allen's answer is our political system right now is in such disarray and such conflict, right, with itself, that I don't believe in 2024 with the presidential election, the general election coming up at the end of 2024, with all of the legal battles of the candidate on the GOP side, the kind of misunderstanding of the candidate on the Democratic side. I don't think that this is going to be a priority for the federal government. That being said, don't forget that the U.S., Congress somehow passed a law to abolish daylight savings a couple of years ago, and they didn't know they did it. So there is the possibility that, you know, Biden slips something in, or, you know, that something happens. I just don't think that at the federal level, as far as legalization, I think we're still a few years away.
It's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you, Gary, and thank you very much for your time. For anybody who hasn't checked out New Frontier data yet or would like to know more, the website is below and it'll be available wherever you listen or watch this episode. Gary, thank you very much for your time and have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. Enjoyed this.
Until next episode.